EU member states apply budgetary projections as part of the EU Stability and Convergence programmes. But how good are these projections? And can we improve them? Comparing what members said was going to happen with what actually happened gives us some interesting insights into why these projections missed the mark and how we can make them better. Hello Hull, welcome.
Hello Tim, nice to be with you.
There is a wonderful graph, first of all, Hull, in your paper showing Italy's projections on budget balance and how they've been so consistently over-optimistic, and the error gets worse the further we get into the future. Is this optimism bias, I suppose we could call it, is this standard for this type of economic forecasting?
You see, we thought it was standard because this research is in a way an update of research that we did about 13 years ago. But it turns out that it is not entirely standard. Some countries are systematically over-optimistic, other countries, and there are also some countries that are systematically pessimistic in the projections. Where this comes from is, we are talking here about projections of the budget balance, and these projections, they are largely driven by the projections of the economy itself, the growth forecasts. And what you see is that typically some countries are over-optimistic about the growth forecasts. That means that they have a perception of more budgetary room. So they will in the spending plans, they will be more lavish.
I think that this is going to be a naive question, because I think there was a little bit of the answer there in what you just said. But does it really matter if these budget projections are wrong when they're submitted to the EU?
I think it matters for a number of reasons. One is that, as I was saying, the budget projections, they are largely grounded in projections about the economy. And if you systematically misproject economic growth, then your spending plans, they will be in a way a mismatch relative to what the economy can afford. That means that at some point down the road you have to correct these spending plans. Maybe you have to consolidate, and consolidation is costly. Another adverse effect is that if you have to correct your projections, or if people see that your projections are systematically wrong, that has an adverse effect on the financial markets. It reduces your reliability as a country in the financial markets. So investors, investors like institutional investors, etc., they will take this into account, that the figures that the government produces may not be quite a correct, unbiased figures. So they would demand a risk premium on holding the debt of this country.
You have set out in this research to work out just how large, how pervasive these inaccuracies are. To do that, what data did you use? What time period did you test?
So actually this is a very comprehensive data set, because we use the stability and convergence programs that every country of the European Union has to submit to the European Commission. So the stability programs are the programs, and they set out the budgetary projections for coming year at up to 3 years in the future, at least up to 3 years in the future. So the stability programs are submitted by the Eurozone governments. The convergence programs are submitted by the non-Eurozone member states. And this is a comprehensive data set. It runs from 1999, the start of the euro, up to 2019, so just before the COVID crisis. And it covers all the countries in the EU, to the extent that they are still member of the EU, because the UK is up to, I think, up to 2020, 2019, if I'm correct.
And of course, that takes us through some pretty interesting economic times as well. When you tested this, did you find out that these errors are the same for all countries? I think you said that some were over optimistic and some were not optimistic at all. And are they significant in size?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, because when you look at the different countries, they show quite different patterns. So it's we see that Italy, also Greece, even to a larger extent than Italy, Ireland, Spain, they are systematically over-optimistic about their budget, while Luxembourg and Denmark are systematically pessimistic. And you see, and by the way, systematic errors into either size are, in my view, harmful. So because they lead to distorted budget plans that may need to be corrected. I can say more about this. But when we look over time, we see that the persistence in the errors is becoming a little bit smaller. We also compared, we split the sample period into up to 2009 and from 2010 onwards, and we see that in a way the correlation of the errors or the average errors over the two periods is positive. So a country that is systematically over optimistic in the first part of the sample tends to be systematically over optimistic in the second part of the sample. Let me just tell you why being over pessimistic is also and I think it's in a way it's not good. Suppose you are over pessimistic, then you have a tendency maybe to spend too little, so to say, and you are accumulating maybe assets as a government, or you're reducing the public debt to very low levels. At some point, a perception emerges that there is so much resources available, that there will be political pressure to spend those resources. I think such a thing we saw in the Netherlands. The Dutch economy did relatively well. Debt is very low. We now have a new government with 4 parties, and each of the parties, they want to see something of their electoral, the plans for the elections. They want to see this fulfilled. So you get a lot of pressure to spend all those resources that are available.
Do we know what the source of these errors is? Is it consistent? Is it that they're getting their spending wrong, too much or too little, or their revenues wrong, too little or too much?
The budgetary errors that we see, they are mostly driven by spending errors. So you can, and we did that, you can split the error into a revenue error and a spending error. And it's about 3/4 of the error in the budgetary prediction is explained by the error in spending.
Now, statistical authorities, they should be getting better at measuring. They tell us that they're getting better at measuring, and so I would assume they should be getting better at forecasting. Is this happening?
Well, that is, of course, a very important question. Techniques are evolving, for sure. Measurement is improving. I'm sure about that. We now have, techniques to monitor the number of transactions, etc. So, what was not available in the past, that is, now becoming possible. Real-time monitoring of the economy. Still, we don't see too much evidence that the forecasts are becoming more accurate. And that also has to do with the fact that maybe the shocks are becoming larger. We've seen over the past 15 years, we've seen a number of important shocks that were not anticipated by by the institutions making the projections. The global financial crisis, the Eurozone debt crisis, Brexit, the COVID crisis, the Ukraine crisis, and these are huge shocks and which are unanticipated. So projections, the models, this is not in the models. So those big shocks, they will systematically get wrong. So it is very hard to say whether they are becoming better, because in a way there are two sides. One of this is the side of the institutions that construct the projections. On the other hand, we have the shocks themselves that are exogenous.
Does this mean then that it would be difficult to find any policy that could improve this situation, that would improve the accuracy of these projections?
You see, I think it is still wise for institutions to keep on investing in techniques, in measuring, in maybe it is, it's very hard to improve the projections, say 1 year ahead or 2 years ahead. But maybe over the shorter period, improvements of projections over the shorter periods, that may be possible. For example, by monitoring the number of transactions, so the real-time information on the economy that becomes available. And, we may have new crises, but it may also be the case that new crisis, we will enter a normal period over maybe the coming 10 years, and then those shocks will be smaller, and so the improvement in the techniques, I would expect then that the projections become more accurate.
Oh, that's very interesting. Let's see what happens in the next few years. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You can read about this research in a paper. It's called Is the Road to Hell Paved with Good Intentions? An empirical analysis of budgetary follow-up in the EU. It is discussion paper 17154 at CEPR. The authors are Holger Betzma, Matthias Busse, Lorenzo Geminetti, Massimo Giuliadori, and Martin Large. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.